Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, WikiLeaks and the online info war over the site's future.
A war that's happening in cyberspace right now.
The battle has been joined, but who are the soldiers? Still, photography and the news industry, what wins awards versus what gets published. And arrests, convictions, and jail sentences. Iranian journalists pay the price. If governments, politicians, and Interpol thought that the informational motherlode that is WikiLeaks would shut down with the arrest and incarceration of its figurehead, Julian Assange, they've since learned otherwise. After Assange's first court appearance in London, friends of WikiLeaks produced mirror sites all over the web to make sure that the organization's work would continue, even if its website could not. And that wasn't all. In the shadows of the World Wide Web, a growing army of people went after the corporations working against WikiLeaks. Amazon, PayPal, and MasterCard, which among them tried to take down the site or choke off its funding, all found that their websites were under a hacker-led attack fronted by a group known as Anonymous. Our starting point this week is on the side roads and in the back alleys of the information superhighway, the new battleground in the fight over WikiLeaks and freedom of information.
The supporters of WikiLeaks are taking revenge.
I think it was the first serious info war. On the one hand, you've got an online organization that's now at the forefront of journalistic endeavor.
On
the other hand, Anonymous, their backers, are at the forefront, arguably, of online protests.
Mystery hackers tried to disable the WikiLeaks website.
And thirdly, the people that are hacking into WikiLeaks and trying to prevent it from succeeding are arguably at the forefront of the opposition.
Some are asking if this is the political awakening of hackers.
So everything is going on online at the moment. Who knows where it'll end?
No one does. That's the thing about the WikiLeaks story. It is a steep learning curve for everyone involved. It has even placed anonymous internet activists in front of news audiences to explain the difference between hacking and a distributed denial of service attack.
Hacking kind of implies getting root access to a computer and kind of actively getting into the computer and destroying it, whereas when one runs a distributed denial of service, you run a piece of software that sends multiple requests to refresh a page from your computer. The most common these days is using a piece of software called the Low Orbit Ion Cannon, or LOIC for short.
This will allow, for example, 1,000 attempts to load a page per second per user. Now, if you multiply that, say, by about 10 people using that, that's 10,000 attempts per second. It stops it being online, it pulls it down, and the more people keep on attacking it, it stays down for some time.
So, in a sense, you could compare it, like I say, to a digital sit-in, to people locking arms and barricading the entrance to somewhere, like a flying picket.
Eventually what you had was thousands of people, each using their computers to launch these so-called denial of service attacks against major companies that had cut business ties with WikiLeaks, and they had some measure of success. Some payments, MasterCard payments, in the run-up to Christmas were disrupted.
That's how legions of net activists took down the websites of Amazon, which dropped WikiLeaks from its servers, as well as PayPal and MasterCard, which after complaints from Washington refused to process donations to the organization. But even some of the most fervent defenders of WikiLeaks and freedom of information disapprove of the attacks.
I don't think that you stop censorship by creating censorship, which is what a denial of service attack essentially is.
What groups like the San Francisco-based Electronic Frontier Foundation advocate is the proliferation of mirror sites. There are already hundreds of them, which guarantee that even if WikiLeaks goes down, the information doesn't go down with it.
They are mirroring WikiLeaks all over the place, and they are looking to get the right kind of domain name service that would be more universal, and I think that's what they need to do. Also, there is another organization that's forming out of folks that worked with WikiLeaks to begin with called OpenLeaks, and they're putting themselves together pretty rapidly and will be providing many of the same functions. And I think that there is power in duplication.
Moreover, the swarming of corporate websites carries the danger of what one might call regulatory blowback. Governments, which already fear the potentially transformational power of the internet, could use the attacks to justify a greater degree of regulation, of control.
I think WikiLeaks could have been much more forceful in distancing them from those cyber attacks, but unfortunately they were not.
We do not initiate this, have nothing to do with it. We are not condemning it either.
I think one of the likely scenarios is that organizations like National Security Agency and the CIA and the newly established Cyber Command will actually gain more power over the internet as a result of these attacks.
I'm not kind of seeking to defend the actions of my contemporaries in that respect, but it is awkward because, yes, I can see how governments would say, well, if these attacks are coming, then obviously the net needs regulation, but I think that then becomes a self-perpetuating cycle because these attacks come about as a result, generally, of attempts to censor information and to censor the internet.
What started out as a story about diplomatic cables and government secrecy, the rights and responsibilities of journalism.
To me, New York Times has committed at least an act of bad citizenship.
And allegations of espionage has moved into uncharted territory on the information superhighway. There is no consensus on the best way forward or even what to call this battle. But there are few arguments over the stakes. They are that high.
I describe this as the first serious info war because I've expected for years that somebody would do something in cyberspace that would genuinely threaten the industrial governments, and they would respond by trying to shut it down.
Joseph Lieberman, who is a member of the Senate's Global Internet Freedom Caucus, on the one hand, but on the other hand, he also wants WikiLeaks to be shut down. He wants Amazon to drop it from its servers. And, you know, the way he acts towards WikiLeaks is not that much different from the way in which China deals with its own internet dissidents.
This is the war where cyberspace will either remain open or it will allow itself to be closed. And it's not simply the virtues of Mr. Assange or WikiLeaks that are on the line here. The real issue is that if they can shut down Julian Assange, they can shut down you.
I hope to continue my work.
So you should be prepared to defend your own interests and not just his.
Here's what our Global Village Voices thought of the continuing Wiki saga and the cyber war it triggered.
I can perfectly understand why people feel enraged about the way in which WikiLeaks has been treated for revealing such embarrassing truths. But I'm also always worried when people take the law into their own hands. And my big fear is that it might result in less internet freedom for all of us, rather than more.
Anonymous hacking websites, to my view, is a rather bad idea. It doesn't help WikiLeaks in the long run. Because WikiLeaks does not stand for cyber wars, but for transparency and truth.
With WikiLeaks' major releases this year, the organization has framed a battle between the physical world, which is ruled by governments, and the more non-physical internet world. It is difficult to call this discord a war, as it does not resemble conventional warfare, but ever since the formation of the internet, it has only been a matter of time before someone would use the power of it to try to push the barriers of government secrecy and information.
If you've got a beef with the media that you'd like to get on the air as one of our Global Village Voices, we suggest you join the thousands of our viewers who follow us on Facebook and Twitter. They go to those sites to find out what stories we're working on so they can weigh in. Or you can just get in touch with us via email. We're at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. The WikiLeaks cable story has claimed all kinds of casualties. You can now count some Pakistani newspapers among them. At least 4 papers there published a story that cited U.S. diplomatic cables describing generals in the Indian military as self-obsessed, petulant, and idiosyncratic, and accusing them of conducting a genocide against Muslims in Kashmir. The story was a complete fabrication. Searches of the WikiLeaks site proved that easily enough, but it went in English-language newspapers The News and the Express Tribune, as well as the Urdu-language publications Zhang and Nawa-i-Waqt. Ahmed Qureshi, a well-known TV personality, was also caught out by the story. The cited source for the article was a Pakistani website, the Online International News Network, which is well known in Pakistan for nationalistic and pro-military views. Some of the papers have since apologized for their mistake. Others have stubbornly refused to do so. And Afzal Khan, the former head of the Associated Press of Pakistan, said any editor should have seen this was obviously a planted story. This is a very sorry state of affairs. There's been another leak, this time in Thailand. As far as we can tell, WikiLeaks had nothing to do with it, that claims it was government troops who killed a Japanese cameraman there earlier this year. Hiro Muramoto worked for Reuters and was sent to cover the red shirt protests in Bangkok in May when he was fatally shot in the chest, becoming the first media casualty in that unrest. This was the last footage he shot before he died. Reuters is now reporting it has been leaked a document from the investigation which it says contains an account from an eyewitness who said he saw, quote, a flash from a gun barrel of a soldier, unquote, and then watched Mr. Muramoto, who was filming at the time, fall. Thai soldiers have already given contrasting testimony, saying they only fired warning shots into the air. The head of the government's investigation is denying the authenticity of the leaked document and has refused to release the full report until the investigation is complete. Iran seems to be going through another one of its periodic crackdowns against journalists. At last count, 7 journalists who have all worked for a leading reformist newspaper, Sharg, have been arrested. The paper has been shut down several times in the past and has recently published a special supplement praising student protesters. Also facing the wrath of the authorities is the head of the Iranian Journalists Union and former editor of some banned reformist newspapers, Mashallah Shamsolvezin. He's been sentenced to 16 months in jail after being convicted of insulting President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and undermining the Islamic government. The charges relate to TV appearances made by Shamsolvezin on foreign news stations, including one in which he referred to the president as a megalomaniac. But there has been some respite for dissident Iranian-Canadian blogger Hussein Darakhshan. He's been granted a few days' leave from his 19-and-a-half-year jail sentence, albeit at the bail price of $1.5 million. Darakhshan started one of the first Persian-language blogs 10 years ago and was credited then for sparking the huge Iranian blogging movement. He's been in prison since 2008, but was only officially sentenced in September of this past year. He was convicted of propagating against the state and cooperating with hostile states, in this case, Israel. After the break, we'll slow things down a bit and take a long look at some award-winning news photographs. Welcome back. The World Press Photo Contest has become a bit of an annual tradition here at the Listening Post. It's a globe-trotting exhibition of iconic and compelling news images. This photograph is part of a winning series by Pietro Masturzo, taken on the rooftops of Tehran. The image takes an indirect approach and tells part of a huge story, the protests that followed Iran's disputed presidential election in 2009. We're going to take a look now at the contest, as well as the photographers, the somewhat contested decision by the jury to honor the work of some non-professionals, and the inclusion of some brutally graphic stills, pictures that most newspapers and magazines choose not to publish. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now looks at 2009 and the year's biggest news events as seen through a lens.
Well, I think there's got to be something very immediate that you engage with very quickly. But I think there's also got to be kind of a slight afterburn.
Photography isn't always about being a very professional image. It's about capturing something in a very important time.
It has to be a strong image by itself, composition-wise. It has to have visual aesthetics that really make a difference.
The most impactful, impressive, and important stories of the year, captured in a series of still images, can be found here. The World Press Photo Contest, a traveling display of people, politics, and places. The Iranian election protests, the bombing of Gaza, and President Obama's inauguration all dominated the 2009 news cycle.
My fellow citizens,
I'd like to think that the pictures, irrespective of the subject matter, were judged as strong photographs. We were aware that there were big news stories last year. You are aware of those stories, but it's important to sort of remember that it's a photographic competition as well.
The contest has always stirred up debate, its jury often coming under fire for its selections. Many in the industry are divided over what the main criteria should be: artistic value or editorial content. The top prize, Photo of the Year for 2010, was awarded to Italian photographer Pietro Masturzo's Women on a Tehran Rooftop, following the disputed Iranian election. The decision was met with both congratulations and questions.
My colleagues and I were quite surprised that that won, because it's pretty quiet. The news event, though, was pretty critical, I think, to the whole world, and that's been shown to be kind of correct.
The mood of the lighting, the fact it was at night, it had this kind of mystical feel to it. This was also something that makes you think, because it was something that it showed just a parallel event to a news event that was broadcast in one way.
It was quite a brave choice, but I'm glad we made it, because I think it is very much part of this kind of new ambiguity. Because life isn't in black and white, you know, things aren't necessarily clear-cut, and, you know, it's nice that photography is kind of evolving.
It showed the situation and what was happening in a unique way, in a way that we never quite visualized before. And that's the power of photojournalism.
What do you think is going on here?
It's the Iranian people being fed up with the government of Iran.
But it was the definition of photojournalism, not its power, that was brought into question with this photograph. The iconic screen grab of Neda Agha Sultan, a woman who in death became the face of the Iranian protests of 2009. This is the first time the World Press Photo Jury has included a non-professional image in the competition. The image is one frame of a video filmed on a cell phone, at a time when journalists were kept off the streets and were even barred from entering Iran. The protests were documented by ordinary people, like the person who filmed Neda's death.
I wonder if it's slightly unfair, because I think these guys happen upon these pictures because they're in the right place. There's not a great deal of skill there, really, and I think the World Press really is recognising skill and artistry, really, isn't it? It's not really recognising luck.
What happened in Iran, it was impossible for photographers to actually get out and compose something with a medium format camera. Images were being captured on mobile devices, on flip video, on things that can be concealed.
Citizen journalists are having an impact on how stories are reported, because they're kind of leading the agenda and actually creating the narrative rather than newspapers.
The choice of the screen grab of Neda was in keeping with this year's focus on the explicit. Crowds visiting the exhibit found themselves either drawn to or repulsed by the more graphic images.
A couple of them I skipped, actually, because I turned the corner here and there was a lot of blood and dead people and stuff like that, and there's so much of that in the papers and on the news and stuff already. It totally takes me out of my comfort zone, that's for sure.
I was kind of walked in off the streets, and you just find out about aspects of human life and stories through such amazing, beautiful images. It's so brilliant.
It can give you a good insight into the human cost of what happens when war goes on. Get it out there to people, especially young people as well. They need to be aware that, you know, life isn't just as they see it over here. There's bad things happening and they need to be reported.
Is Israel using phosphorus weapons, white phosphorus in Gaza?
In a fast-moving 24/7 news world, a still image gives the viewer the power of recall. It captures the essence of a movement, a specific instance in the life of a developing news story.
I think a photograph gives the viewer a moment to breathe. And a video is moving so quickly, and you're being bombarded with the sound and the motion. But with a photograph, you have the time to look at the four corners. You can interact with the feeling of it. You can see, you know, a little bit more of what's there.
Each picture here tells a story, be it political, personal, or a portrait. It's the interaction between still image and viewer that makes the stories come to life.
More Global Village Voices now on the World Press Photo Awards.
When they shoot events, the photographer
document history. Each picture is a little piece of history. Neda's picture in Ireland became a symbol, became a part of this history. So in exceptional circumstances like this one, it's great to give a special mention even to a non-professional photographer.
I think the World Press Photo Top Prize is a bit like the Nobel Peace Prize, that the jury often gives it to a photograph that represents an issue that they feel very strongly about. And in Pietro Masturzo's photograph's case, it was the Iran and the rooftop protests and freedom of speech.
The winner image by Pietro Masturzo, it is an image that tells several stories at once. Tells a story of an unusual way to protest, tells us a story of fear, a story of oppression, and shows us the difficulties the journalists went through in order to document such an important moment in Iran's history.
Finally, we're going to go back to the WikiLeaks story for our show ender. Mark Fiore is an American political cartoonist who gave up newspapers way back in 2001 to make his living on the World Wide Web. Fiore won the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for political cartooning. That's the first time the winner of that prestigious award came from the online world, so it's fitting then that his take on the WikiLeaks diplomatic cable story is our web video of the week. Not that it will be a popular choice amongst people like Muammar Gaddafi, Hillary Clinton, Kim Jong-il, or Ban Ki-moon. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
It's a world of power, a world of lies. It's a world of secrets and a world of spies. There's a nuke over there and a nurse with blonde hair.